And hello, good evening to everybody. You'll notice the background is a little bit different if you have been to these before. I am, as I mentioned, on holiday for most of the week. I am in a hotel right now in the middle of the desert with my mom, uh, so I may look a little exhausted as well. But I'm having fun with family, so that's necessary. Well, let's just go right ahead and jump into the last of uh, our series of the discussion of 13 tips that I had written about and pieces of advice for grieving. Um, for those who, oops, have not been here before, and my screen is not advancing. There we go. We're gonna, yeah, it's PowerPoint. I work for a company where we live and breathe by PowerPoint, so it's just easier to keep track of everything. We're going to, so the agenda is that we'll do a quick introduction of who I am, because some of you may not know who I am. Uh, the Zoom basics, just for simple navigation. What are the 13 pieces of advice? We'll talk about the final five numbers, 9 through 13, why they matter, and some strategies that you can do, and any Q&A that may have come through. We had a number of participants pre-register, but nobody provided any questions ahead of time this time, which was kind of odd. So hopefully we'll have a robust Q&A at the end of the session um, where we can address any questions that people have. So let's just dive right into it. So, and by way of introduction, my name is James Levesque. I am the author of the book and the blog for Life After Losses. Uh, I am not a licensed grief counselor. What I talk about is from my experience in talking with hundreds of other grieving spouses, in addition to the two losses that I went through. I have spent the majority of my career in consulting and project management. I am a single parent of two, currently living in Massachusetts. Um, my two losses were in 1995, I lost my first husband, and then in 2014, I lost my second. Today is actually a day of significance for me because on July 14th, 1988, if you've read that, I know it's in the book and I believe it's in the blog, and there was a social media post about this earlier today. This gentleman on the right was my first husband, Bob Roders. Um, on the evening of July 14th, 1988, 33 years ago, he pulled me aside and said, "Hey, can we talk?" And so the talk was, is there something more uh, happening between the two of us other than just roommates? It turns out there was, and we were together for 7 years before he passed away. So today is a day that I look back with fondly, a little bit of nostalgia, a little bit of melancholy, but for the most part, I look back on this day with happy thoughts because I had 7 pretty good years with the guy. So, Zoom basics. Unless you're speaking, please mute yourself. I don't know what kind of background noise we're going to hear. I've turned off the air conditioner here. There was a thunderstorm that just passed through, so hopefully the audio is okay. Um, I am recording, so if you do put yourself on camera, be aware that you might your face might show up. Um, so within Zoom, there are different reactions that you can do. You can, at least on my screen, there's a reactions button. It can, you can do clapping hands or thumbs up. Ask me to slow down, go faster, or raise your hand. So if you have a question in the middle of when I'm speaking, if you do the raise your hand function, um, that will tell me that you have a question. I can stop and get it and or answer it then, or hold off and answer it at the end of the session. And then you can also use the chat as well. There's a chat function if you want to put something in the chat. So, what are the 13 pieces of advice? Honestly, these are random pieces of advice that came to my mind while I was writing them down. Um, I trust my subconscious enough to know that I will get what I need from it. Um, and when I look back, I probably could have consolidated a couple of these things, but 13 seems like a decent number. Baker's dozen. But these 13 pieces of advice are really tools that I have been using for the last 7 years since my second husband's passing, to take personal ownership of my grief, my journey, to understand where I am in that process, and to feel empowered, more than the grief taking control of me. And there are also things I think help, uh, to remember to help. Um, as I mentioned earlier, today is the 33rd anniversary of that talk. Um, and so one of the strategies that we discussed very early on, I think it was or the third strategy, was to be prepared for those triggers, and anticipating dates, and how you want to um, feel, and celebrate or not celebrate those dates, how you want to interact with your emotions on those dates. And so um, these are just tips that I think are very helpful we all go through our individual journeys, through grief and into healing. So, jumping right into it, number 9 is, the grief recovery is not a straight line. Now, a lot of times when you hear about grief and the phases of grief, the stages, we've got the shock and denial, anger, bargaining, depression. Testing is kind of a newer concept of between and acceptance. Um, but we don't actually go from one to the other. We spend a lot of time in one, and we branch out into the others frequently. And so it's important for us to try to figure out where within these stages of grief recovery we currently live, and where we spend most of our time, because that will allow us to get to a point where it is more of an acceptance, so that I can look back on that last 33-year history with a sense of nostalgia, but happiness, and not right back into the grief 33 years later. So it just it helps us to understand where we're at in that journey. And it is possible to go back through them throughout the day. I've been accused of being uh, multipolar at some points, because of just the insanity of grief. There's nothing linear about it. It is completely chaotic. Your emotions are all over the map, which is expected. And just knowing that little piece of advice helps me to be aware of where I am in each one of these phases. So why does it matter? And I think I just went through some of these. We know that grief is chaotic. You can't make any sense out of it. But at least understanding that this happens allows you to not have expectations that you're going to go from one step to the next. Just understanding that little piece, um, I think, is very, very helpful. And then when you understand the stages of the grief, you can understand where you spend most of your time, as I mentioned, and you can think about what you can do to spend more time in the next stage. So if you're spending a lot of time I'll back up here. If you're spending a lot of time in the depression stage, but you know that you want to get to acceptance, you want to be able to try leaving the house for change, try meeting with people, and try socializing outside of your grief group or whatever. Um, there are steps that you can take to go from spending most of your time in the depression mode and into the other box uh, for the testing, to see uh, where you can fit in. And again, almost everything I talk about in terms of the book and the blog and these calls is what you can do to take control over your own healing journey. The first piece of advice was don't let anybody else tell you how to grieve. This is your journey. You have to make that decision. You're making the choices and the steps that you need to do to heal for you. Um, and so another thing you hear me say a lot is that you need to recognize where you are emotionally, face the truth with truth, because it said the truth will set you free. But understanding where you are allows you to really address how to proceed and how to move forward yourself. Um, and some people say fake it till you make it. That doesn't work all the time, especially around this, from my experience in talking to people. Um, Number 10. Oh, so were there any questions on number 9? I guess I should ask. And seeing no hands raised. Okay. So number 10. Feel what you need to feel, especially anger. Um, you are a human being. You are built on emotions. Um, and it's very normal to be angry. Somebody, something, somewhere took your loved one away from you. Somebody is to blame, right? Something is to blame. And because of that, you're going to have you have anger. And it's okay to be angry at God if you believe in God, or a higher being, whoever you believe in, the person who died. I can't tell you how angry I was with both of my husbands, frankly. Um, just yeah, and I've written about it, so I won't go too deep into the conversation. The doctors, with my second husband, why would they prescribe that medication to him? He had pneumonia and a history of abuse. I don't know, but they did. And it's very easy to be angry with ourselves. Maybe we didn't listen well enough. We didn't notice. We didn't recognize the signs. Something that we constantly kick ourselves. Coulda, shoulda, woulda. If I'd only seen this, I'd only not done that. We need to stop doing that. And why it matters, because you can't recognize your emotions, then you're not experiencing the truth. And again, as I said before, without the knowing your truth, your path to healing is limited. You've got to be able to understand where you are right now, and face that, and then not hide behind that truth. Um, the other big thing is that expressing your emotions is healthy. I wrote in the blog, and I referenced several studies in the blog that holding your emotions in is as bad as smoking for your health. I mean, it's as bad as a terrible diet for your health. And this goes against one of my second rule, which is take care of yourself. Do everything you can to take care of your needs while you're grieving, because you need to take care of you before you can take care of anybody else. So express the emotions, and there's many ways of expressing emotions. We'll go over some of the strategies later, but you could write a letter. I wrote plenty of letters, of angry letters to God, to each one of the men, to everybody. Wound up burning them because I didn't want to get that, as a ritual um, process. I had to get those emotions out. I had to acknowledge that they were there. Doesn't mean I have to send the hate letters to the doctors, but I at least got it out there, and I burned them, just for my own sense of well-being. Any questions on number 10, setting up your emotions? So number 11, talk about your loved ones. Memories of a fade, and we talk about our loved ones to keep the memory alive. As I was thinking of what to talk about today on this, I was reminded of the movie Coco, um, in in which the character is trying to keep the memory of their dead grandfather alive. And it rang really true to me that we really want to keep the memory alive of the person that we lost. Um, they existed, and I I personally find it kind of offensive when people expect us not to talk about them as if they didn't exist, and to pretend that they didn't exist or pretend otherwise, just because it makes other people feel uncomfortable. The big thing is that I don't believe that your comfort and that your mental stability and that your well-being and your journey has to be squashed by somebody else's opinions about their comfort level, um, in knowing about your loved one. I just think you need to acknowledge where you are, and talking about our loved ones really does help. Um, why it matters. The more I talked about the husbands, and I was more able to focus on the good memories because I would talk to people and we'd recall those good memories or those good stories, and we'd have some laughs. And I would be able to smile more and get to experience those memories again, or hear about new ones because frankly I traveled a lot for work. I wasn't there very often. And hearing some of the stories of what he was doing while I was working and away from home was very helpful to me in terms of getting a fuller picture of who he was. Because at his memorial service, I saw person after person come up and talk about him in terms of recognition that I didn't have of him. I knew him as the husband, the father, the person who would tell me what bills needed to get paid or that their daughter would need braces, all the day-to-day stuff. But our friends and colleagues and neighbors found him to be, uh, charismatic and yeah, funny. The things that reminded me of what drew me to him to begin with. For 15 years, the focus kind of shifted. 14 years and 15 years and two kids. The focus in our relationship kind of shifted. So getting that other perspective was really helpful to me in making him a whole person to me, and not just the husband that wanted me to pay the bills or whatever else, or telling me that we needed to get a new boiler because the old one was on the fritz. Um, and another reason that I like talking about them is, uh, as I mentioned before, we never get over it. They are part of who we are. They're part of your story. They're part of my story. Um, and so and they help, you know, make me the person I am. So there's no reason for me not to acknowledge and continue to acknowledge their existence. And then I honor their memory. I try to do my best to honor the memories of both of them, and the contributions they made to our world. With the first one, when we bought our house, there was a donation made to the pier in Ventura, and so on the dedication plaque are our names in brass. So there was some contribution that was made. Yeah, and so things like that. With my second, he was very involved with school, so I got involved in schools to kind of help bring about um, want some closure to what he was working on in that realm, but also to give me an insight into some of the things that he did uh, while I was away working. Um, Number 12. This one is usually the hardest one for a lot of people. And it's find a path to forgiveness, really, especially towards yourself. Um, and this is really a lot about self care. Now, going back to I think it was the second or third piece of advice, um, is to do what you can to take care of yourself. Forgiving yourself and forgiving others, maybe those people that you hated in you know in the anger phase, um, helps you release the past. Um, you can't change the past. You can focus on now, which is where I suggest most of us are at the point where we want to focus on the now, not the past. And then after you're able to focus on the now, then you can start looking towards the future. Very early on in the grieving process, you're going to be spending so much time on the past, especially like for that first year is typically the time frame that I'm saying is that first year is all about first, and it's anniversaries, and your focus is on the past. And then the next several months is usually you're starting to look at the now and just totally afraid of the future. But eventually, you're going to need to start looking at the future as you progress through the process. Um, Again, start with forgiving yourself. I've said myself a few times, it should have been me. I was the one who was supposed to go first. Why didn't I see that coming? If I'd only paid more attention to what you told me. These are all things that give us survivor's guilt, and they make us feel guilty and in need of forgiveness of ourselves. Um, Forgiveness is not is and there's this quote from Oprah Winfrey here. So forgiveness is letting go of the hope that the past can be changed. We all know that the past can't be changed, so it's time to get rid of that notion that it can. Um, and it's not an easy thing to do to forgive people. But why it matters is that letting go of the hurt and the anger is the first step, really towards self love and self care. One of the one of my friends, his music was playing at the beginning of the broadcast. Is Levi Christ, and he wrote a song a dozen years or so ago called "Let It Go." It was long before Frozen and Idina Menzel, and it was all about his journey and his acceptance of self care and self love. Um, I've written about it in a blog, I think, or at least in social media posts. But I have a tattoo of some lyrics on my arm here, that direction, to remind me um, that I need to. So it says, "Love is all you need. Close your eyes and breathe. Let it go. Let it all go. It's time to forgive now the one who matters the most." And so I have this as a reminder to myself to forgive myself for the things that I may have done in the past that would have made life difficult for either one of those men. And anybody else really, any things that have made life difficult for myself. I've made some stupid mistakes in my past. But in doing that, it's my way of reminding myself that forgiveness is absolutely what's needed for me. Um, we can't change the past. We know that. With forgiveness, we acknowledge that the past existed, but we can't dwell on the could have and should have. I kind of mentioned that earlier. And then facing the truth with honesty, again, to me, is the easiest path to healing, um, because you can't really address something that isn't real, uh, in terms of your emotions. So um, always look for truth when possible. And then number 13. Um, as I said before, I am not a licensed therapist. I've just been through losing two spouses. I have sought the help as necessary. I've gone through um, uh, a couple of support groups. There are support groups that you can join online or in person. Um, Friends and family, lean on those people who've gone through grieving before. Learn some tips from them. Learn or get some inspiration from others, how they healed, so that you can put that into terms that work with your life. Um, and then if you feel that you're not moving in a direction forward in a direction, and you'll know if you hit that point. If you don't feel that you're not, you just can't get to the point where you can smile. Um, I would definitely suggest that you seek a professional, to talk about some things about maybe you have complicated grief syndrome. Um, that's very prolonged grief, and it happens. It's in mental. Um, it's in the DSM. You can so seek treatment for those kinds of things. A professional can help evaluate whether or not you need treatment. I'm certainly not allowed, or not allowed. I'm not qualified to suggest whether or not somebody needs treatment, but I think we can all benefit from um, seeking help and finding a professional to make that determination with us, not for us, but with us. Um, and then don't allow stigma to stop you. As far as I'm concerned, I think we have put such a negative stigma to mental health in this country, um, that we tend not to seek help when we need it. And when you're grieving is really the time you need help, and you should accept help more than uh, more than not. So with that, um, one of the other things, at least in terms of help, um, let people help you. If they want to make you a dinner, let them make you dinner. Um, don't be afraid to ask for help. I learned that lesson the hard way the first time around. I lost almost all of my friends because I just would not allow anybody near me. Um, Even though they wanted to help, I just couldn't do it. The second time, I did allow people in to help, and that made life just so much easier. So why it matters, that 13th piece, grieving is hard enough. You shouldn't have to do it alone. Um, by seeking help, you lessen the burden on yourself. People are grieving every day. We all have a story. We all have different coping mechanisms. When you're in a support group, you can learn and take inspiration from other people. Um, Writing was a big thing for me, even before I wrote the book. And accepting help is practicing self-care, and taking care of yourself is absolutely necessary. So I guess that the theme from this last five tips is do what you can to take care of yourself, which goes back to one of the earlier uh, topics. Um, but that's why I think it's better. So some strategies that we want to employ, and if I can move my picture out of the way, I can read them. Think about how you want to feel, and then start taking steps in that direction. Um, there was at about the 2 year mark after the first Bob passed away. Um, I realized that I was doing the same thing and expecting different results, and that just was not happening. Uh, and I knew where I wanted to feel. I knew I wanted to be able to move forward with my life, and so I had to take those steps in that direction to do that. And for me, I just went. Uh, I went on the radical side. I quit my job. I started an entirely new career, um, and I started traveling everywhere um, for my work, and that was enough of a shift in my mindset to allow me to um, to move forward a little bit more with my healing. Um, think of ways to express your emotions. So I mentioned this earlier that for me it was writing. I took there that I dropped the screen. For me, I wrote. I journaled an awful lot. I wrote letters, like I said. I burned them if I needed to. Some I would put up in a balloon and then yeah, not worry about the wildlife apparently at that point. But I I don't do that anymore. Um, but there are different things that you can do to express your emotions. You can write, do something, get creative. Um, I also, if you read the book, put together a bunch of songs and put them together in cassette tapes and for the younger people, cassettes are old. Um, but they each cassette, each set of tapes had a different theme and story to it, and the reason why I included the song was part of that, just to help share the what I was going through with people who would ask. Um, make music, do something that is meaningful to you, so that you can help them get out, so you can address help those emotions get out, so that you can address them. This is another strategy is to find people with whom sharing a story about your loved one won't make them feel uncomfortable. Um, most people, do, if they don't know your late husband or wife or mother, father, whoever you lost, um, have share their stories um, with people who don't know them, and they may find some inspiration in some of the stories as well. Or write write a memoir, write something. Um, and then another strategy I keep mentioning is to try to find the truth of the source of what your emotion is and what you're feeling. And so you kind of always have to keep scratching deeper. And I've been taking acting classes, and one of the things is one of the recurring themes our instructor is at us about is to scratch deeper about why is this character doing certain things, what's their motivation. But about the same thing about yourself is that you keep scratching deeper and asking why. Eventually, you'll get to the answer, and then that's the point where that's the root of what you need to address. Um, and having gone through a couple of therapy sessions or a few therapy, having gone through therapy, that's kind of part of that process too. At least it was in my experience, is to keep getting deeper so that we could address what the root cause of um, some traumas are, or sort of uh, some feelings. You know, I thought I had dealt with some things many years ago, and just recently went through an um, altering, I'm not sure that's right, a life altering session where we basically went into a hypnotic state and found something that I thought I had dealt with that had been causing an issue. Um, to this day. So I was able to do a release and get rid of that. Even though we think we get rid of things, sometimes we don't. But keep scratching deeper. Get to your why. Get to that understanding. And accept help when offered. As I mentioned, seek help when you feel stuck. Those are the big things. So that wrapped up the last five topics of the 13 pieces of advice while grieving. Yes, that I have to remember the name. Um, that I had. I did not see any previously submitted questions via email or via the the, the registration site. So at this point, I would like to open it up to anybody who has any questions or comments. Did I did I make sense to anybody? Did I spark something um, that will inspire you to look at something maybe a little bit differently, or to start working in a direction? Um, I'd love to hear back from anybody. So if you have the raise hand feature, or if you can find that raise hand function, um, I think it's on the participants tab. I'll wait a little bit. If not, then then I will let us all go and enjoy the rest of our Wednesday evening in the middle of July. All right, well, not seeing any hands or anything in the chat. Chat. Where's the chat? Oh, I do see one thing in the chat. Oh, that's from Erica telling us. Sorry, she's late. That's okay, Erica. I have it recorded, so you'll be able to catch it on the replay. All right, and looks like people are dropping off. So, um, to that end, have a wonderful evening. I hope I was able to help, and enjoy the rest of your July. I will be back online in August. So take care of yourselves.